You can say, oh, these are different pictures and like people just moved slightly, but the skyline wouldn't fucking change. So what were they hiding? Because it seems to me they didn't want people to see this boat or this green boat.
Okay, so this creator did something nobody else has done yet. She took the photos from July 4th, lined them up, overlaid them, and what showed up underneath left everyone speechless. Now I'm going to walk you through every single breakdown, frame by frame, photo by photo, detail by detail. If the photos can't be trusted, then what exactly are we being shown and why? Let's watch this.
Now, as a follow-up to my last video, I wanted to show you this. This is from Nolan's mom's Instagram from the day after he went missing. This was the picture that she was sent. So naturally, these two pictures should line up, right? So what I did is I made sure to line up this little like black loopy thing here. I made sure to line up this part of the boat and this like rope here. Now watch. Look at the difference here. Look at that. He's barely moving. And the entire skyline is different. You can say, oh, these are different pictures and like people just moved slightly, but the skyline wouldn't fucking change. So what were they hiding? Because it seems to me they didn't want people to see this boat or this green boat. Like, the skyline doesn't change over here. Look, it's in the same place. It's just over here. So 100% from the get-go, they were tampering with photographs. Absolutely nothing that they've given anybody can be trusted. I am about to wipe Evil Murr's smile clean off his face because this man is a joke. So yesterday I was playing with the contrast in this picture to try and get a better picture of the pattern on Morgan's swimsuit. I realized that half of this picture is not changing at all when I play with the shadows, which is an indicator to me of a photograph being altered. So then I started scrutinizing this picture because why would I ever have reason to doubt it before? And then that's when I noticed this boat seam underneath all of their legs. You can almost trace it all the way until you get to Nolan. Not only are these creases in different places, but there's no shadow, nothing underneath his legs here. In fact, if you look really closely, make sure your brightness is turned all the way up, you can see a seam right here that just stops. And that would connect over here. Then I saw in between this elbow here, look, there is so much fabric that's supposedly his shorts. Not to mention a very intimate hand placement. I mean, that elbow is going all the way up to them hips. And then look, in between Morgan's legs, like, why does this shadow suddenly stop? You can see a seam here and then nothing. And then look at the way Nolan is holding this can. Got one finger like over the lid, but the can looks really like wide. And then his thumb is on the other side of the lid. Like, how would you hold something like that? Now look at this half of the picture. Notice how Nolan's head is casting a shadow going to the left. Same with Eric here. Head casting shadow to the left. Which means right where I am on the screen would be the direction that the sun would be coming from. And yet his shadow is going straight down and his shadow is going straight down and to the right. Implying that their light source, their sun, is coming from over here. So is this picture fake? Then I started looking at the photos that they gave to Officer Tatum. Why is Nolan a giant? He and Jax are literally almost the same build and height. And I understand that perspective's a thing, but not when they're this close to each other. Not when the camera is right here. And look, same problem with this one with the shadows. Shadow going this way, shadow going this way, shadow going this way, shadow going this way, shadow going straight up and down, shadow straight up and down, straight up and down, straight up and down, straight up and down, to the left. And this jacuzzi tub looks normal at first until you zoom in. First off, why is his elbow blending into his hat? Why is his chest an Audi? And whose fucking face is that? Because that looks like AI tried to recreate this guy. This is another picture of Nolan with them, and I'm like, why does his eyes look swollen shut? Why his neck as big as his head? But get ready, folks. I'm about ready to blow their little he wasn't on the Triton picture out of the fucking water. Because right here is Morgan's swim trunks. You can see his like beads here, his glasses, his hat. But I couldn't figure out what the hell was going on in this picture. Then I was comparing these two videos and I realized, oh wait, it's a visor. It's a visor hanging off of this. See, there's the bill and like the little like part there. But as I was comparing these two pictures, something fucking hit me. Look at black part, metal, white plastic, metal, visor. Black part, metal part, white plastic, no metal pole. Look at the steering wheel. The steering wheel has this like white flap thing that's going on here. What? No white. But look, there's the door. There's the door. What's going on here with this leg? I don't know. Now, do you guys see it? Can you see it? Vertical bars, horizontal bars, vertical, horizontal. And it's not just that the vertical bars are missing, there is no horizontal bar like right here. And not only that, y'all see how there's like this curved bar here? Where's the bar in this picture? It should be going right next to the hat, like right into it. And yet we have nothing here. And I know y'all have lots of questions and I can't pretend like I have any answers to them. Where we had left off, Warren had already called Miss Christine and then they somehow ended up at Jax's grandparents' house. That's where they all stayed that weekend, and so that's why Nolan's keys were over there. They had to have been at the grandparents' house, who mysteriously never showed up during any of these confrontations. Somehow the phone had gone from the party that they were all at to Jax's place, and then Warren left after a phone call to Morgan. According to them, 10 to 15 people showed up and just walked into Jax's house and demanded the phone. Wyatt gave the address in which the boat was at. They all start migrating over there. Then Morgan and Wyatt and another friend are tracking their 360s and seeing that they're going over to Wyatt's house. Then they call 911 to tell them that the police are on the way to his house. Then they're searching the boat, and then they come back to Jax's house around 1 o'clock in the morning, according to him. Mind you, that's when they explain to the police about their friend being missing. And so then the report says at 1:38 in the morning, the Jackson County Sheriff's Office say that they spoke to several of the friends that were on the vessel with Nolan, saying that he was in the company of an unknown female. But Morgan, Jax, and Warren all claimed that they did not travel to the island on the same boat as Nolan. So who did they talk to? Because it sounds to me like they had told the police that they were on the same boat as him. Keeping in mind that this is what Warren told Miss Christine.
Named Katie. And so then it turned into, Katie is also missing. No one can find her. And the explanation of no one knows this Katie, like we've never met her.
And Tristan said this.
I was talking on my other buddy's phone, talking to Warren. He was dialing Coast Guard because he hung up the phone and was like, hey, this is them, bye, and hung up the phone. And that was the last time I talked to him.
Mind you, Tristan is friends with Katie. They are mutuals. I have confirmed this. So now that we've got that timeline fucking straight, let's back up to something that Warren said during this interview.
If you're motivated enough to do it, yeah. Like, I made a phone call to my mom, and I had to call her like 8 times before she picked up because either her service was bad because she was on the back side of the aisle on the south side, or my service was bad, and it was just hard to get through.
Do y'all see that? Let me play it again slower for you.
Either her service was bad because she was on the back side of the aisle on the south side, or my service was bad, and it was just hard to get through.
Oh no. Not only did Warren confirm that his mom was on the south side of the island, but Warren himself said that if you're motivated enough, you can call somebody. I tried calling my mom 8 times. Yet this is what he said last time.
A little off the island, you have cell coverage, and even on the island, like I called my mom when we were on the island, it was fine.
So which is it? Did you call your mom with ease, or did you try to call her 8 times because you were motivated to get in touch with her? But Warren wasn't the only one to slip up, because listen.
And he's on the phone with Cito, and he's trying to get them on the phone. And as he stated in the moment, he's like, Cito's just asking all these dumb questions. I can't figure out what's going on. And so finally hangs up. And after the trim to the motor started to work again. So they manually trim it down by the buttons on the motor, trimmed it down, and some electronics started to come back on. And they got the boat to crank over, and they're like, all right, untie us.
So first off, Jax just proved that the boys put the phone on mute during the call with Cito. Because I've listened to the entire 8-minute call, and at no point did they ever say anything about them asking all these stupid questions. Then he said after they hung up on the Cito, that's when it started working again, and they said, okay, untie us, implying that it had been tied up to the other boat the entire time. But we see in this video that they are hauling the line back in right here as he's on the phone. See, you can see right here where the line is being pulled in from across the way where the boat is stationed. Meaning he had already hung up with Cito at that point. and he had to have been on the phone with someone else. And what we see here is, once again, we have an interview where they go into so much detail about stuff that doesn't fucking matter.
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and first off explain a boat.
We fucking get how a bilge pump works. We get it by now. Stop fucking talking about the bilge pump. What we actually want to hear about is the multiple stops that were made before ending up back at the grandparents' house, before they even took the boat to the boat dock. We want you guys to explain how the sea tow was canceled by the grandfather on the captain's private line before you guys had even hung up with sea tow. That's why nobody believes a fucking word that you are saying. Because I showed y'all yesterday how AI had clearly doctored these photos. If you missed it, look, silver pole. Look, no silver pole. It's actually white. And if you look at this picture in the grandparents' driveway of the Triton, you will see that the little handrails are not leaning over. You will see that the rails are going straight up and down and not leaning, which is why I also suspect that the identity of whoever this is was intentionally covered up. Because first off, who wears this weird swimsuit thing? This is somebody who, if they were with them, would have stood out in a crowd. But this woman who's in a red striped swimsuit with a white baseball cap shows up in a lot of different pictures, just oh so obscured. Here she is again, handing out beers on Bart's boat. So I personally suspect that whoever that was in fact on the Triton, and they used AI to change her clothing and to obscure her identity. Because I think this was either Warren's mother or Wyatt's stepmother, which would explain the older female voice people have said they've heard on the sea tow. Because otherwise, why would he need to call his mother 8 times? Unless, according to his own words,
If you're motivated enough to do it, yeah.
because remember, there is a 4th boat out there. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Holy fuck, I just accidentally stumbled onto something that literally is concrete proof. Oh my god, next video coming, oh my god! Oh, these little liars. I told y'all that Jax was the ringleader. I told y'all, he sat in this interview and he was telling stories about shit that he wasn't even there to witness. So let's break down some of the stuff that I heard in this interview. Let's start with Warren's first phone call, because y'all will remember that Warren said that he was over at Ava's house for that 4th of July party when they all started realizing that Nolan was missing, and he called Miss Christine at 11 o'clock.
One of the first things I told Miss Christine Wells in the first phone call that ever occurred with anything to do with Nolan Wells being gone, because I was the first person to call Miss Christine about anything. First phone call, anything to do with Nolan Wells, was me making a phone call to Christine Wells. And one of the first things I said to her, with multiple witnesses here, pull up the phone call if you want. She said, oh, well, Nolan's location is with y'all at, where the house we were at. And I was like, well, no, he left his phone with us. I told her this.
And yesterday, the same time that this interview came out, Christine Wells said this.
360 says that he's on land, and he was like, well, no, I mean, when we have his phone.
So both versions of the story say that Warren didn't tell her about the phone until after she confronted him with the 360. Now, Warren tells Miss Christine that he knows somebody in the Coast Guard and that he's going to call them, which is very fucking different than calling the Coast Guard, which absolutely explains why the Coast Guard came out and said at first that they had not received a call from the kids that night. The Coast Guard's initial statement said they weren't informed until 12:30. Then the Coast Guard later changed their story and said, oh wait, actually we did. And it seems to me that that first call was most likely an off the record to a friend kind of deal, which means these people freaked out and didn't call the Coast Guard until after all these people showed up at Jax's house. Which would explain why in the course of this interview it went from Warren called the Coast Guard to we did. Now, when the subject turns to how the family got the phone back from these boys, you'll notice that there was a couple slip-ups.
Warren, you weren't at the house, and so you weren't there when they came to get the phone and all that. So
now remember, Warren just said that he wasn't at the house when the phone was got. And then Morgan talks about getting a phone call from one of the people in Christine Wells' group.
And how did they get the phone back?
So I got a call from a kid we went to high school with. He called me just asking me questions. He saw people posting on Snapchat, like the picture that was circulating.
Except this picture wasn't posted until July 5th. So how could this picture have been circulating on Snapchat that night? But let's continue.
And he called and he was asking questions. He was like, where's Nolan? When's the last time y'all seen him? And
And then he was like, so where are y'all at? And I told him, I said, we're at Jax's house. And then Warren got on the phone, and I don't know. So they come to my house, right? And they kind of
Hold on, before we get there. Was it confrontational or was it just just trying to find? It was confrontational already.
Wouldn't y'all agree?
Yeah.
He was 110%. He was very confrontational.
And when did this was this on the night of the 4th or the next day?
This was the night when this was before they came and got the phone. So this is the night of the 4th, yes.
You guys are missing a part of the story. How did you get from Ava's house to Jax's house? Because Miss Christine is watching you guys on the Life 360. So suddenly she's seeing the phone leave one location and go to another. Of course I would be upset. And now all of a sudden Warren is there when the phone stuff starts happening? He's listening to the phone call? Now I need y'all to remember that Warren also said that the phone was in his truck on the first conversation, as we have from this report. Meaning if we were to believe Warren that he was not there when everybody showed up looking for the phone at some time in between 11 and 1 a.m., so then that would mean after they heard this angry phone call, Warren gets the phone out of his vehicle and puts it in Jack's house and then leaves.
There's probably like 10, 15 people in my house I don't even know. And they're all up in our faces, going crazy, asking where Nolan is, and we don't know. And finally they get into Wyatt's face, and they're like, where's your boat? Where's the boat at?
Demanding his address.
Demanding his address and stuff like that. And he finally ends up giving it to him. We give them the phone. They have the phone at this point. Then they get the address to his house. Then they go to his house. And they're searching all over his boat, what I heard and stuff like that. Well, anyways, I don't really know much about that. But they come back to my house at around 1 o'clock in the morning. We called law enforcement. I was with Wyatt at the time after we left Jackson's house that night. I was with Wyatt, and one person we were with saw that their location was headed towards Wyatt's house. And so Wyatt got on the phone with 911 and was like, hey, these people are on the way to my house or already at my house. My mom and my dad are there alone, and they know nothing about this. But Wyatt's mom actually, when they were looking at the boat, they were actually walking from the boat, and she came out and started talking to them.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Wyatt, Morgan, and Jax were all together. Warren was gone for some reason at this point. 10 to 15 people just barge into your house. Don't know why your grandparents weren't around. That might explain some things, huh? Guess y'all had the house all to your fucking self that weekend. But then they ask Wyatt for his address so that they can go look at the boat. Wyatt gives them the address. They start heading over there. Wyatt and Morgan get into a car and leave Jax's house. Somebody else that you were with that we aren't hearing about is tracking someone else's phone. I don't know if it was somebody who was with the group that they had access to, or if they were tracking Nolan's phone and they saw it was heading to Wyatt's house. And even though Wyatt gave them the address, and instead of calling his parents, he calls 911 and tells them, my parents don't know anything about that's going on. Can you send police over there? Now, mind you, it was about half an hour after being on the phone with Warren that Christine was able to actually call and report him missing. But she was having to go back and forth and go down to all these different agencies because nobody would fucking help her. And frankly, I want to know why all of this confrontation was left out of the fucking report. Like, if this family had to be removed from 2 different properties by the police, why is there no record of that? And in fact, it wasn't until after these confrontations that MDMR and Ocean Springs Police apparently had their little conversations about who was going to be taking over the case. Because remember, the Jackson County Sheriff Lieutenant told them that deputies had spoken with several friends that had traveled to the island on the vessel with Nolan, and that when they were left, he was in the company of an unknown female. So now, even though Warren had supposedly called the Coast Guard, all these family members are telling the police that the kid is missing. These are the people that last saw them. They're all like, we last saw him on the island. Still, the deputies said that they did not have reason to believe that there was any water-related exigencies or emergencies. Don't worry, y'all. I've got a lot fucking more to say about this stuff, so come back for part 2. I'm going to be immediately recording it because Warren fucked up pretty badly in this interview, and I'll show you why.
If photographs from the trip can be shown to have been digitally altered, then every timeline constructed from those photos, every claim about who was where and when, every statement that says, look, here he is, he was fine, all of it becomes unstable. That's the stakes. So let's go through this piece by piece, and I'm going to do something I always do on this channel. I'm going to present each claim at its strongest, and then I'm going to tell you what it still needs before it becomes proof. Because that's the line. That's the line between investigation and accusation, and we do not cross it here. Thread 1. The photo overlay. The TikTok creator takes 2 photographs shared from the boat trip on July 4th. Both show the group aboard what has been identified as a 22-foot 2022 Triton TRX. Both photos contain fixed visual anchors, a rope, the boat's structure, metal framing. When the creator aligns the images using those fixed points, the skyline behind the subjects doesn't match. The horizon shifts. The clouds are different. The light angle changes. Now, there are innocent explanations. The boat could have moved between shots, the photographer could have shifted position, a different lens or zoom level warps perspective, but the creator's argument is specific. They're saying when you lock the fixed elements in place, the background displacement is too large to be explained by natural movement alone. They're suggesting compositing, that someone may have placed subjects from one image onto a background from another. To be absolutely clear, that claim, without the original file metadata, without EXIF data showing timestamps and device information, without independent forensic image analysis, remains unverified. It is a visual observation, a compelling one, but not proof, and here's why that matters. The official autopsy will remain sealed until a grand jury reviews the evidence, which is standard practice in Jackson County, according to the local district attorney. That means the public is operating in an information vacuum, and in that vacuum, visual analysis like this fills the space. Thread 2. The shadow problem. Same set of group photos. The creator points out that the shadows cast by different individuals in the frame appear to point in different directions. If everyone is standing in the same location, under the same sun, at the same time of day, their shadows should fall roughly the same way. They don't, according to the analysis. Again, I'll be fair. Uneven surfaces, reflective water, nearby boats and structures can all bounce light and create misleading shadow patterns. Anyone who's spent time on the water knows that light behaves differently out there, but the creator isn't making a casual observation. They're presenting side-by-side comparisons, and they're asking a forensic question, a question that has a forensic answer, one that requires an expert to deliver. Not a TikTok creator, not me, a qualified digital forensics analyst with the original files. And that brings us to something critical. An attorney for the family of Nolan Wells said they have hired audio engineers to review a distress call made from a boat on the day of his disappearance. So we know the family is already investing in expert forensic review of evidence. The question is whether that same standard will be applied to these photographs, and whether the originals even exist in an unaltered state. Thread 3. The Triton inconsistencies. This one is harder to explain away. And I want you to listen closely. The creator compares photographs and video footage of the Triton, the boat at the center of this case, and they flag structural differences between images. Vertical metal bars that appear horizontal in other shots, a silver-colored pole that appears white in a different image, handrail configurations that seem to change. Now, notice this. These aren't differences in angle or lighting. The creator is claiming that the physical structure of the boat appears different between images. That's a much harder claim to dismiss with, well, the camera moved. The teenagers were traveling aboard a 22-foot 2022 Triton TRX when the boat began taking on water near the west tip of Horn Island. That's the boat. One boat. Its physical structure doesn't change between photos taken the same day, unless the images aren't showing the same boat, or unless they've been altered. And I want to be responsible here. It is possible that some of these visual differences come down to image compression, color shifting in different lighting, or camera angle distortion. All of those are real phenomena. But the creator is making a structural argument. Rails don't move. Poles don't change color. And if there's a legitimate explanation, it should be easy to demonstrate with the original files, which is exactly what investigators have asked for. According to reporting on this case, investigators have specifically requested original, unedited photos and videos taken on July 4th. And they've narrowed that request to images depicting alleged altercations or containing images of or believed to include Nolan Wells. Think about that language for a second. Alleged altercations. Believed to include. That phrasing is deliberate. It tells you investigators are aware that there may be images out there showing conflict, and they want the unedited versions. Now let's move to thread 4. And this is where things shift. The CETO distress call. Wox News obtained audio from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources related to the Nolan Wells case. The recording is of a call made from a teen on a boat on Horn Island on July 4th around 4 p.m. to a private towing company, CETO. In that call, the teen can be heard saying, "Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can y'all please come?" The caller requested the disabled 22-foot Triton boat be pumped out and towed to Fort Bayou Launch, saying there were about 7 people aboard. The dispatcher asks a critical question. "Are all passengers on board and in good health?" The caller responded, Yeah, everyone is on board." Now here's the friction. Law enforcement officials have said they were told by witnesses that Wells was not on the boat when it left the island. So either Nolan was on the boat during that call at 4 p.m. and left afterward, or he wasn't on the boat and the caller's answer wasn't accurate. Those are the only 2 options, and the audio itself has become its own battlefield. Some people online swear they hear someone saying Nolan right before you can clearly hear someone say, "Oh my God." In other parts of the call, it seems like someone might have said, "Check his chest," and "Wake up." You can clearly hear the caller yell an expletive. To be clear, none of those interpretations have been confirmed. I want to say that again. None of those interpretations have been confirmed. Muffled audio on a boat, in open water, with wind and engine noise. Our brains are pattern-matching machines. We hear what we expect to hear. That's not cynicism. That's auditory science. But the family isn't leaving it to internet speculation. They have hired audio engineers to review that distress call. That is the correct move, because either the enhanced audio reveals something material or it doesn't, and only a qualified expert can make that determination. Does this look like panic or a plan? That's the question hanging over this call. A boat is sinking. 7 people are on board. A teenager is on the phone with a dispatcher, and in the background, something is happening. We just don't know what yet. But here's where thread 4 connects to thread 5. And this connection is something most people have missed. The Edward Paltzik attorney connection. Attorney J. Tyler Cox, who represents 3 of the young men caught up in the case, has enlisted prominent defamation lawyer Edward Andrew Paltzik to help defend their names. Paltzik has represented Trump in high-profile legal battles against CBS/Paramount, the New York Times, and BBC. Think about that. We're talking about 18, 19, 20-year-olds from the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And they now have a defamation attorney whose client list includes a former president of the United States. The legal fund was set up by Dr. Benjamin Hudson in support of his son Warren, as well as Jax Patalo and Morgan Seymour, 2 other friends of Nolan's. Now, to be fair, hiring a lawyer is not evidence of guilt. People hire lawyers to protect themselves. That is their right. And when you've been publicly accused of involvement in someone's death without evidence, getting legal representation is a reasonable response. But the TikTok creator's point is about escalation. The speed and scale of the legal response raises a question, not about guilt, about resources, about who has access to what kind of protection and who doesn't. And that brings us to thread 6, Bart Edmiston's silence and what broke it. The Edmiston family said they had remained silent out of respect for the investigation until online accusations against their son intensified. The family said Bart Edmiston Jr. was among the hundreds of people who traveled to Horn Island on the 4th of July and that he helped tow Wells's friend's boat after it experienced a mechanical problem. They also said he has voluntarily cooperated with investigators by sitting for interviews, providing access to his phone, boat, and GPS device, sharing photos and videos from that day, and identifying potential witnesses. At no point in this process has Bart Jr. ever been identified as a suspect in Nolan's death, the family said. And their attorney went further. Mississippi attorney Russell Latino said he is representing Bart Edmiston Jr. I have been retained by the family of Bart Edmiston Jr. to pursue people defaming him with wholly fabricated assertions of fact that are putting Bart, his family, and friends in harm's way. So the Edmiston family's position is clear. Bart was there, Bart helped, Bart cooperated, and Bart is now being targeted unfairly by online speculation. And honestly, the threats are real. 3 people have been charged with threatening a judge, a witness, and local officials connected to the investigation into the death of Nolan Wells. None of the 3 appear to know Wells, his family, or the boating group, or be part of the investigation. According to a probable cause affidavit, one defendant made multiple calls to 2 witnesses, threatening to kill them and their families. He said he knew where they lived and told the second witness he would cut them up and put them into a suitcase. That is real, that is documented, and that is a problem. Because when online speculation leads to death threats against people who have not been charged, who have not been named as suspects, who have cooperated with law enforcement, that is not justice. That is mob behavior, and it makes the actual investigation harder. And this is the but that matters. The TikTok creator's point about Edmiston is not about guilt, it's about the silence itself. And specifically, it's about what happened between the silence and the legal threats. The creator argues that there's a gap, a window where questions could have been answered publicly, voluntarily, without lawyers. And that window closed. Now, whether that's fair criticism or unreasonable expectation, that's for you to decide. A person has every right to say nothing. The Fifth Amendment exists for a reason. But in the court of public interest, silence gets interpreted, fairly or not. That is approximately 2,500 words. Let me know when you'd like part 2, which will cover thread 7, the 4th boat, the racial dimension and national attention, the family's plea, the legal status, and the closing. So we've covered 6 threads, 6 separate angles this TikTok creator has pulled on, and every single one of them ends the same way, with a door that's been partially opened and a file that hasn't been released. But thread 7 is different. Thread 7 is the one that, if confirmed, reshapes everything else. The 4th boat. Here's what the creator is raising, beyond the 3 vessels already discussed in connection with this case. There may have been a 4th boat present during the critical window on July 4th. That's the claim. And right now it is unverified. Let me say that clearly. Unverified. But here's why it matters. If a 4th boat was present, and if GPS data, phone records, or witness statements can confirm that, then we have an unaccounted vessel in an area where the official story says Nolan Wells chose to stay behind to catch a later ride with other people. Think about what that means. If he was waiting for a ride, who was that ride supposed to be? Was it one of the 3 documented boats? Or was it someone else? Someone not yet named in any official account? Wells's friends have told officials that they needed to leave the gathering early because their boat was taking on water, and that Wells had told them he wanted to stay behind and catch a later ride with other people. They say that's when they last saw their friend. That's the official account. That's what law enforcement has been working from. But the creator is asking, who was the ride? Name the boat. Name the person. Show the GPS data. Because if there was a 4th vessel that hasn't been named, then the story of he stayed behind to catch a ride becomes a lot more complicated, and authorities have specifically flagged that they are investigating online reports of an alleged altercation on the island on July 4th, and whether it involved Wells. That's not the creator speculating. That's investigators themselves saying there may have been a confrontation, and they don't yet know if Wells was part of it. An altercation on an island, potentially involving a young man who never made it home, and a 4th boat that may or may not have been there. Connect those 2 things. Sit with them. Whether there's a proven link between those 2 data points right now, no, there isn't. But they are both live threads in an active investigation. And the 4th boat, if real, is a lead that GPS data could answer definitively. Phones log their location. Boats log their movement. That data either exists or it doesn't. And that's exactly why the creator ends this thread with a question rather than a conclusion, because the answer is in the files. not on TikTok. Now, let's talk about something the TikTok analysis doesn't fully address, but that you cannot understand this case without: the ground this case is sitting on. The threats came amid rampant speculation and scrutiny of the investigation, deepened in part by uncertainty surrounding Wells' final hours, distrust of law enforcement, and the state's long history of racist violence. The teenager, who was black, had traveled to the uninhabited island with a group of friends from high school, all of whom were white. That's the context. That's the soil this case grew in. And it matters, not because it tells us what happened. It doesn't. But because it tells us why so many people, especially black Americans, looked at the initial response and felt something familiar, something they've felt before. Local authorities said early in the investigation that they had uncovered no signs of foul play. That was the first public statement: no signs of foul play, drowning suspected. And for a lot of people, that statement alone landed like a slap. Not because it was necessarily wrong, but because of how fast it came and what it seemed to close off before the investigation had barely opened. The family heard it and they didn't accept it. Neither Wells' official state autopsy nor the autopsy requested by his family has provided clear answers about the teen's death. A preliminary report of the autopsy requested by Wells' family was released last month and said the cause of death was undetermined pending further investigation. Undetermined, not drowning, not foul play, undetermined. That is the medical and legal limbo this family has been living in for over a month. Undetermined, which means no official cause of death, no manner, nothing they can point to and say, here is what happened to our son. Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind, whose office received Wells's body the day it was found, said there were no immediate obvious signs of foul play or trauma on Wells's body. No immediate obvious signs. That's careful language. Notice this. It says immediate. It says obvious. It doesn't say there was no trauma. It says there were no obvious signs visible in that first examination, and it doesn't close the door. It leaves it cracked. And the family, through Ben Crump, has kept pushing on that crack. Now let's talk about what Ben Crump's involvement actually means in this case, because some people hear his name and they hear politics. And I want to strip that away and just look at the legal reality. Crump represents the family. He is not a political actor in this case. He is an attorney whose job is to advocate for the interests of his clients. And his clients are a mother and a father who buried their 18-year-old son without knowing why he died. The Wells family made an emotional plea for an honest, thorough investigation. We just want to know what happened and why our baby didn't come home, his mother Christine Wells Wansley said at a news conference with Reverend Al Sharpton and Ben Crump. That's not a political statement. That's a mother speaking the most human sentence a parent can speak. And then something happened that tells you about the atmosphere around this case. Something that goes beyond grief. Something calculated. Crump said the Mississippi Board of Nursing had closed an anonymous professional misconduct complaint filed against Wells's mother, who works at a local health system. Crump called the complaint frivolous and unfounded. He said in a statement, it was an attempt to distract a grieving mother and intimidate her into silence, filed by someone who would not put their name on it. Wells's family has condemned the complaint and said they remain focused on finding answers about what led to his death and advocating for a fair and transparent investigation. Read that again. Someone filed an anonymous professional complaint against a grieving mother, against her nursing license, while she is in the middle of a public fight for answers about her dead child. The complaint was closed. It was dismissed. But the act of filing it, the intention behind it, that's not a legal question. That's a moral one. And it tells you something about the pressure this family is operating under. Who files that? Who looks at a mother planning her son's funeral and decides the right move is to threaten her job, and then hides their name? I'm not going to speculate on who did it, I don't know. But I want you to understand the environment this family is navigating while simultaneously demanding answers from law enforcement, dealing with a sealed autopsy, and watching the internet tear itself apart over their son's death. Because here's something that gets lost in the noise. This investigation has become harder because of the online response. Not easier, harder. One of the three defendants, Edward James Porter, is accused of making multiple threats to two witnesses on July 31st, according to court documents obtained by NBC News. According to a probable cause affidavit, Porter made multiple calls to two witnesses, threatening to kill them and their families. He said he knew where they lived and told the second witness he would cut them up and put them into a suitcase. Those are witnesses, people who may have information, people investigators need to talk to. And now those people have received death threats from someone who, according to law enforcement, doesn't even know the Wells family. None of the three appear to know Wells, his family, or the boating group, or be part of the investigation. Think about what that does to a case. Witnesses go quiet. People delete their phones. People lawyer up. Families deactivate their social media. And the actual evidence, the GPS data, the photos, the original audio files, all of it becomes harder to access, not easier. One mother wrote that she deactivated her Facebook and that she fears for the safety of her children. No one in our family is trying in any way to impede with the investigation by law enforcement or to otherwise hamper the family and law enforcement's quest for answers, she wrote, adding that her son cooperated fully with the sheriff's investigation. That is a mother who is scared for her children's safety because of an investigation into another mother's dead child. That's where we are. And I want to say something directly to anyone watching this who has been tempted to take matters into their own hands online. I want you to hear this. The Wells family has not asked for that. Ben Crump has not asked for that. Al Sharpton has not asked for that. What they have asked for is a fair investigation, official, legal, evidence-based. Every time someone sends a threat, every time someone posts a name without evidence, every time someone creates a fake toxicology report and spreads it, you are actively hurting the case. You are hurting the family, and you may be hurting innocent people. A Mississippi official confirmed that a purported toxicology report from Nolan Wells circulating through social media was fraudulent. Officials emphasized that no official toxicology report has been released and urged the public to rely only on verified information from investigators while the case remains active. A fake toxicology report circulating on social media about an 18-year-old boy who just died while his mother is still planning where to put his photograph. That's where we are. Now, let's talk about where the investigation actually stands, legally, precisely. It has been more than a month since a search crew found the body of 18-year-old Nolan Wells near Horn Island, about 10 miles off the Mississippi coast, where he celebrated the crowded 4th of July with friends. No answers about what led to his tragic death have emerged since. The district attorney overseeing an investigation into Wells' death said that all evidence in the case would remain sealed until it is presented to a grand jury, which will decide whether the evidence supports criminal charges. So here's the precise legal status right now. The state autopsy is complete. The results are sealed. A grand jury will be convened. The grand jury will review the evidence and determine whether it supports criminal charges. No charges have been filed. No one has been named as a suspect. No manner of death has been officially established. That's it. That's what we know for certain. What we don't know, what the autopsy found, what the toxicology shows, whether the grand jury will convene in weeks or months, whether the investigators have the original photo files, whether the audio from that distress call has been forensically enhanced, whether a fourth boat has been identified, whether the alleged altercation involved Nolan Wells. Every single one of those questions has a factual answer, sitting in a file somewhere, waiting for the grand jury, or waiting for someone with authority to release it. Tyler Perry paid for Nolan's funeral. Think about that for a moment. A media mogul across the country watched this story and felt moved enough to call and say, "Let me take that from you. Let the family grieve without that weight." Hundreds of miles from Mississippi, members of the New Orleans community held a second-line procession to honor Wells and call for justice. Organizer Reuben Evans said the event was intended both to celebrate Wells's life and remind his family they were not alone. "We're not afraid to question. We want answers," Evans said. "We just want the Wells family to know we are behind y'all." That's what community looks like when it's working. Not threats, not fake documents, that. Now I want to come back to the TikTok analysis for a moment, because I promised you I'd pay off something planted earlier. Remember when I told you that investigators have specifically requested the original, unedited photos and videos from July 4th? The originals, not screenshots, not shared copies. There's a reason that request matters so much more now, because if the photo manipulation claims from the TikTok creator have any validity at all, the original files are the only way to prove or disprove them. EXIF data embedded in the original file shows what device took the photo, what time, what GPS coordinates, whether the file has been modified since it was captured. That data survives in the original. It doesn't survive in a screenshot. It doesn't survive in a compressed social media upload. So every photo shared publicly from that day, every image that made it to Instagram or TikTok or Twitter, those files are already compromised for forensic purposes. The metadata is stripped. The compression alters the pixel data. The only thing that matters now is what's on the original devices. And the only way to get to those original devices is through law enforcement, or through voluntary cooperation from the people who had them. Which brings us back to the attorney connections. The legal threats, the silence, whether that silence is innocent self-protection or something more, that is the question. And right now, only the grand jury is in a position to compel answers. The TikTok creators' 7 threads are not a verdict. They were never presented as one. What they are is a map, 7 places to look, 7 questions that have factual answers buried somewhere in the evidence chain. And the creator's final point is the right one. The original files are the key, not the social media posts, not the internet speculation, not the anonymous complaints or the death threats or the fake toxicology reports. The key is in the metadata of an original photograph sitting on someone's phone or cloud backup. The key is in the enhanced audio of that CETO distress call. The key is in the GPS history of every boat that was near Horn Island between 3 p.m. and dark on July 4th, 2026. Those files exist. Or they've been deleted. And if they've been deleted, that itself tells a story. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. He went to an island to celebrate the 4th of July with people he considered his friends. He never came home. His mother, Christine, said it the only way a mother can. We just want to know what happened and why our baby didn't come home. That's not a legal argument. That's not a political statement. That's just the truth of what this is. A family, a boy, a question that doesn't have an answer yet. The ground is shifting in this case. The grand jury is coming. The sealed autopsy will eventually be unsealed. The GPS data either confirms a 4th boat or it doesn't. The original photos either show manipulation or they don't. The enhanced audio either reveals something material or it doesn't. And we will be here when any of that breaks. Because that's what this channel does. We stay with the case until there are real answers. Not theories, not speculation, answers. So here is where we leave you today. With the same question we started with. Not what happened to Nolan Wells. We'll leave that to the grand jury. The question we're sitting with is this. Are the images we've been shown from that day telling the truth? And if they're not, what does that do to every version of events we've been asked to accept? That question has not been answered. It may be answered in a courtroom. It may be answered by a forensic analyst the family has hired. It may be answered by the grand jury in a sealed room we'll never see inside. But it will be answered. If you've watched this far, you already know why this case is bigger than any single detail. Drop in the comments which of the 7 threads stands out to you most. Not who you think is guilty. Which piece of evidence do you think matters most? Because that conversation is worth having. And subscribe, because when the next update drops on this case, you'll want to be here.